Alright, so, the Game Boy Advance. It's only the successor of the third best-selling game console of all time, but more advanced. Literally everyone had one, which was a convenient talking piece because I was the only kid who could not play PS2 games. I mean, that shit was cheap. It was like $100 at launch, and it's pretty much the only reason why I ever got into video games in the first place. But there were so many games I never got the chance to play because going to the store and begging your mom to get you a new game was a dice roll, and you wouldn't want to waste that chance on something like Hamtaro Ham Ham Heartbreak. But now I do. And it wasn't until I was older that I discovered emulation, and with it, piracy. And what the computer equivalent of AIDS was. Apparently, there were so many other games on the Game Boy Advance other than Pokemon. You got Harvest Moon, the Mega Man Battle Network series, a ton of Super NES ports, Pokemon but in 240p, and a game I hear almost no one talk about, Summon Night Swordcraft Story. And with a name like that, I can kinda understand. Putting aside the most generic title for a JRPG possible, there's more to this game than just being a generic JRPG. For starters, instead of having a turn-based system like other JRPGs where you have to attack, wait, then attack again, instead combat encounters are action side-scrollers where you attack repeatedly. It's genius. As the title implies, the main mechanic of this game is crafting swords, but not just swords, but an assortment of weaponry.
But VT, don't all JRPGs have a crafting system of some sort?
Yeah, but is it in the title of their game? Yeah, I didn't think so. Unlike other JRPGs, instead of weapons giving you some sort of damage type that's super effective against a certain type of enemy, the weapons themselves have an inherent advantage against certain enemies through the different movesets the weapons give, highlighting the strengths of each weapon and their niche uses. You got the sword if you want to hit stuff, the axe if you want to hit stuff hard, the spear if you want to hit stuff from far away, the drill if you want to hit stuff multiple times, and the knuckles if you want to hit stuff multiple times but like a JoJo character. Each weapon you craft is slightly different from each other even if they're a part of the same category of weapon. Like some swords have more damage but less durability, some have a bigger hitbox, some are just blatant upgrades of the previous, and there's one that's a fucking ladle. Man, I told you this game was good. You could completely beat this game without ever crafting anything but a sword, but if you choose to progress in other weapon classes, you'll discover those niche situations where a certain weapon might be more useful. A prime example being the drill, specializing in doing a stupid amount of damage to weapon durability. It's honestly one of my favorite mechanics of this game, where if you're fighting an enemy who has a weapon, and if you've damaged their weapon enough to break it, preferably with a weapon class whose main niche is to break weapons, you gain a unique blueprint to the weapon you just broke. And to me, I don't know, there's just something magical and empowering about stealing a boss's weapon. And it's not like Mega Man where the boss is using this huge ass flame pillar to fight you, and when you finally manage to beat the piece of shit and steal his weapon, it's just disappointing. Nah, in this you get the real deal. It's just good game design. The game's all about using different weapons, and they reinforce the gameplay philosophy by giving you a new weapon recipe to play with. It even goes deeper by adding this stat called tech, which is pretty much how comfortable your character is at wielding a certain weapon. So even if you do get a new weapon to make, it doesn't automatically devalue the ones that you're already accustomed to, showing that even though stat-wise the new weapon is superior, you aren't proficient with it yet, and you need to practice with it before reaching your fullest potential with that particular weapon. It is genius, and it's being outshined by fucking Hamtaro Ham Ham Heartbreak. As for the story aspect of the game, I think it's great when it's not taking itself too seriously because the humor and the characters do a lot of heavy lifting here. And before you say anything, yeah, I know, this game looks very anime. Oh, and VT only likes this game because he's a fucking weeb, yada yada. And yeah, I admit, on the surface level, this game has a lot of anime cliches. You got a red-headed tsundere, a reverse trap, a snobby rich blonde kid that uses a spear. Man, I hate this guy. The MC's dad is dead, your master is simping for your mom, the whole game is just one big tournament arc. And despite all of that, the writing is so captivating I find myself resetting for the sole purpose of finding every single dialogue option, which I admit is pretty futile because seeing every single possible dialogue is impossible on a single playthrough because the dialogue difference is based on your gender and your summon partner. But man, is it worth it? This game has some wacky dialogue in it sometimes, which alone gives enough replay value to replay this game at least 8 times, but the story also gives you plenty of options for branching paths, which despite it linking back to a main endpoint, gives you a varied experience on different playthroughs. Like there's this one part of the story where you gotta covertly rescue your friends, which involves exploring an entire dungeon, but if you're a complete dunce and get yourself caught, you get thrown right to the final boss of that arc. And I don't know, I think it's cool how the game just lets you do that. And we haven't even talked about the sprite work and animation, its killer OST, the post-game content, the abundance of small Easter eggs and details. And when you put it all together, you have yourself a pretty swell game. So swell actually managed to get a sequel, which honestly more of the same, but with the amount of games in this series that got released, I'll take whatever I can get. And at a glance, the sequel had a lot of things going for it. It had a brighter art direction in comparison to the dull gray city of the previous game. The animations look smoother. The writing got a little bit more wackier, but like in a good way? The OST is still pretty killer, and they added a fishing minigame, which alone just pushed this game from good to great. But if these games were so good, why haven't they gotten more attention or games for that matter? Well, as much as I would like to flex my superior taste in games to those poor primitive minds who had never heard of this game, that just isn't the case. This time. Putting aside the generic name, the series is actually a spin-off series of the ever so popular tactical JRPG series Summon Night. What's that? You never heard of Summon Night? Well, me neither, because they never localized the mainline series till 2015. I don't know, don't look at me, I just read the wiki. It doesn't make sense why they would localize the spin-off series before their mainline series. It'd be like the equivalent of Game Freak giving us North American strictly Pokemon Pinball, then like 12 years later, all of a sudden slapping us with X and Y. And this is just speculation here, but the timing of these localizations were really bad. The games in Japan came out in 2003 and 2004 respectively, but for us in NA, we got them nearly 2 years later in 2006. Do you know what else came out in 2006? The DS. Lite. The DS was already on the market for 2 years by the time these games came out, so not only did these games have to compete against the newer generation of games coming out for the DS, in addition to the well-established library of GBA games, it had to do all that with a generic name like Summon Night Swordcraft Story. Okay, I'm sorry, I just gotta rant about the name real quick. Dude, it's like 5 words. 5 generic RPG-related words. Like, other games have like 2 words, right? Like, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Fire Emblem. Maybe slap on a number or a third word and call it a day, but like 5 words? That's like too many words. Like, I can guarantee you, I'm literally the only person in the world who gives a shit about this game, and even I have to constantly recheck if the night in Summon Night is referencing to the time of day or a medieval night. And I keep getting it wrong. Okay, so why is VT getting so worked up over some obscure video game series this time? Well, first off, it would help if there were more games that have mechanics and gameplay similar to this, but as far as I know, there isn't. Except for there is. Some of the old devs who made Swordcraft Story created a new company to make a spiritual successor to the series called Maglan Lord, which is supposed to come out in early 2022. And at first you might assume I would be super hyped for this. It looks like it's gonna have a lot of the core mechanics of the previous games, except more of an emphasis on the dating sim aspect of it, which hey, I'm not complaining. But upon looking up gameplay, visual clarity seems to be an issue. They've also moved away from pixelated graphics in favor for 3D models for the worse, since it looks very dated in comparison to modern games. I mean, all in all, I'll take what I can get from this niche genre, but that's not the reason why I'm making this video. No, the main reason why is that this series actually had a third game, except it never got localized in America. And here it is in its glorious native language. Isn't it completely incomprehensible? Yeah, well, apparently, so did a group of people back in 2010 who decided they would collaborate together to make an English patch of the game. And like all group projects that rely on the goodwill of community collaboration, it suffered from a general lack of organization, communication, and inactivity, which inevitably led to little progress being made. And honestly, this video was meant to serve as a way to spark interest and get people invested in the series so that maybe someone out there with ROM hacking experience can pick up the project. And maybe subscribe. But to my surprise, while doing research for this video, I discovered that the project is still ongoing and is currently making steady progress to translate the game. I even got to talk to the project lead and community manager, and it's going pretty well. They literally just released the beta for the first 2 days of the main story, and progress is slowly but surely being made. Apparently, one of the main reasons for the halt in progress in the past was a mixture of team leads leaving and for someone to develop the necessary insertion tools to insert scripts into the game. I don't know what that means, I'm just reading off what they told me. Yeah. The person who was responsible for the inserter in the past wasn't active or responsive enough to make any meaningful progress, which caused the project to pretty much be in limbo. Until recently, where an inserter was created by users Norm Matt and Unknown Brackets, and as of right now, the team has everything they need to make steady progress, which they are currently working towards. And if you want to contribute in some sort of way, they did mention they do need people experienced in pixel art and people who are able to translate Japanese. So if you think that either applies to you, feel free to join the Summon Night community Discord. And even if you don't have either of those assets, just being a part of the community and letting them know how hyped you are for the project is one hell of a morale booster. And how can you not be hyped for this? Just look at those graphics and animation. Visually, it's one of the best GBA games I've ever seen. I didn't even think that this was possible on the GBA, but to be fair, neither did I think Shrek on the GBA was a possibility either. And I wish I could tell you more about the game beyond that, but I don't want to spoil the game too much for myself. And hopefully this inspires some of you guys to enjoy what I think is probably the most underrated game in the Game Boy Advance library. See ya!